The evening air carried a slight chill as Raj Malhotra stood at the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the glittering city below. At 32, he had everything most people spent their lives chasing: a thriving business empire worth billions, properties across 3 continents, and a name that opened doors everywhere. Yet tonight, as he swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, his mind was troubled. "Sir, your mother is on line 1, his personal assistant called from inside. Raj took a deep breath before walking back into his office. These calls from his mother had become more frequent lately, all revolving around the same topic: marriage. "Mother," he answered, his voice deliberately calm. "Raj, beta, have you thought about what we discussed?" His mother's voice was gentle but persistent. "The Sharma family has agreed to all our terms. Their daughter, Priya, is well educated, from a good family. The astrologer says your stars align perfectly." Raj pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mother, I've told you how I feel about arranged marriages. And I've told you how important this is for our family. Your father's health is declining. Before he..." Her voice broke slightly. "He wants to see you settled. The business alliance with the Sharmas would secure our position in the Eastern markets." Guilt. The oldest weapon in a parent's arsenal. Raj knew his father's health was indeed fragile. The old man had built their empire from nothing, and his one wish was to see the family legacy continue. "I haven't even met this girl," Raj protested weakly. "You'll meet her at the engagement ceremony next week. We've already sent out the invitations." Raj nearly dropped his glass. "You what?" "Mother, this is my life we're talking about. It's our family legacy, beta. Sometimes personal desires must be set aside for greater responsibilities." After hanging up, Raj hurled the glass against the wall, watching it shatter. His assistant wisely closed the door, leaving him alone with his anger. Across the city, in a modest but elegant apartment, Priya Sharma sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by research papers. At 28, she was on the verge of completing her PhD in environmental science. Her research on sustainable urban development had already attracted international attention. "Priya? Can we come in?" Her mother's voice was unusually hesitant. "Of course, Mom." Her parents entered, exchanging nervous glances. Her father cleared his throat. "We have wonderful news, beta. The Malhotra family has accepted our proposal. You and Raj Malhotra will be engaged next week." Priya stared at them in disbelief. "What proposal? I never agreed to any marriage, let alone an arranged one." Her mother sat beside her, taking her hand. "This is a golden opportunity, Priya. The Malhotras are one of the wealthiest families in the country. Raj is their only son. So I'm supposed to abandon my research, my career, everything I've worked for, to become a trophy wife to some rich man I've never met?" Priya pulled her hand away. Her father's expression hardened. "This isn't just about you. Our business is struggling. This alliance could save hundreds of jobs. Besides, the Malhotras have promised to fund a research foundation that you could head. So I'm being sold to save the family business." Priya's voice trembled with fury. "Don't be dramatic," her father snapped. "This is how things are done in families like ours. Success requires sacrifice." Later that night, Priya sat on her balcony, tears streaming down her face as she called her best friend. "An arranged marriage in this day and age," she whispered. "I can't believe this is happening." "Have you Googled him at least?" her friend asked. "Maybe he's not terrible." Reluctantly, Priya opened her laptop and typed Raj Malhotra into the search bar. Countless images appeared: a tall, undeniably handsome man in impeccable suits at business functions, charity galas, and occasionally, with beautiful women on his arm. "Great," Priya muttered. "A playboy billionaire." 1 week later, Priya sat stiffly in an ornate chair, wearing a heavily embroidered red and gold lehenga that felt too tight and too heavy. The engagement ceremony was a lavish affair at the Malhotra's mansion. Hundreds of guests, many of whom she'd never met, came to congratulate her on catching one of the country's most eligible bachelors. Through it all, Raj remained distant. He performed the rituals mechanically, barely looking at her. When they were briefly left alone for the official engagement photos, Priya decided to break the ice. "I'm as thrilled about this arrangement as you are," she said quietly, maintaining her camera smile. Raj looked at her properly for the first time. "I'm sorry you were dragged into this. I was about to say the same to you." A flicker of surprise crossed his face. "Most women would be ecstatic to marry into my family." "I'm not most women," Priya replied. "I was perfectly happy with my research and my independence." Before Raj could respond, they were surrounded again by family members and photographers. The brief moment of connection vanished. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of preparations. Priya barely had time to think, let alone work on her research. Her university granted her leave, assuming she'd be taking time off after the wedding. Her life was slipping away from her control, piece by piece. Raj, meanwhile, threw himself into work, staying at the office until midnight most nights. When his friends invited him to a last hurrah bachelor party, he declined. His heart wasn't in it. Instead, he found himself researching Priya online. Her academic credentials were impressive. Articles she'd published in scientific journals showed a keen mind. She was nothing like the demure, social climbing women his mother usually approved of. On the morning of the wedding, Priya stood in front of the mirror in her bridal suite. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, face painted with heavy makeup, head bowed under the weight of traditional jewelry, body draped in a red wedding sari that cost more than her annual university stipend. "You look beautiful," her mother said, adjusting the pallu of her sari. "I don't feel like myself," Priya whispered. "You'll be Mrs. Malhotra soon. That's who you are now." The wedding was even more extravagant than the engagement, 1,000 guests, international cuisine, performances by famous singers. Through the 7 circles around the sacred fire, through the vows she repeated after the priest, Priya felt like she was watching someone else's life. Raj wasn't much better. He went through the motions automatically, his mind elsewhere. Only when he looked at Priya's downcast eyes did he feel a pang of something, guilt, perhaps, or maybe the recognition of a kindred spirit trapped by obligation. The reception lasted well into the night. By the time they reached the honeymoon suite at Raj's family's 5-star hotel, both were exhausted. "I'll sleep on the couch," Raj said immediately after the door closed behind them. Priya, who had been dreading this moment, looked up in surprise. "You don't have to pretend. I know what's expected in arranged marriages." Raj loosened his tie. "I don't force myself on unwilling women, arranged marriage or not." "How noble of you," Priya couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Do your girlfriends know you're married now?" Raj's eyes flashed. "I don't have girlfriends." "Don't believe everything you read in gossip columns." "Right. And I'm supposed to believe a man like you has been living like a monk?" "You don't know anything about me," Raj snapped. "Exactly my point. We're strangers who just got married." They glared at each other, the tension in the room palpable. Then, unexpectedly, Raj's lips twitched. "This is absurd, isn't it?" Despite herself, Priya felt a smile forming. "Completely absurd." "Let's start over," Raj suggested, extending his hand. Raj Malhotra. Workaholic businessman forced into marriage by family obligation. Priya took his hand. "Priya Sharma, now Malhotra, I suppose. Environmental scientist whose career just got derailed by the same obligation." "Your career doesn't have to end," Raj said, surprising her. "I read some of your papers. Your work on urban green spaces was impressive." Priya blinked. You read my research? I wanted to know who I was marrying. For the first time since this whole arrangement began, Priya felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this wouldn't be the prison sentence she'd imagined. They talked for hours, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, gradually moving closer as the conversation flowed. Raj told her about the pressure of taking over the family business at 25 when his father first fell ill. Priya shared her passion for creating sustainable cities. You know, Raj said thoughtfully, Malhotra Industries has been looking to invest in sustainable development. Perhaps there's a way to incorporate your research. Are you offering me a job on my wedding night? Priya asked, amused. I'm suggesting a partnership, Raj replied. This marriage was forced on both of us, but maybe we can make something meaningful from it. As dawn broke, they were still talking, planning a future neither had imagined possible the day before. When Raj finally fell asleep on the couch, Priya covered him with a blanket, studying his face in repose. This wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning of respect, possibly friendship. For now, that was enough to face the first day of their unexpected life together. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains of the honeymoon suite, waking Priya from a fitful sleep. For a moment, she was disoriented, the heavy wedding jewelry she'd forgotten to remove leaving marks on her skin. Then reality crashed down. She was married to Raj Malhotra, a man she barely knew. Raj was no longer on the couch. Priya heard the shower running and used the moment alone to collect her thoughts. Last night's conversation had been unexpected. Behind the cold businessman exterior, Raj seemed thoughtful, even kind. But morning often brought clarity after night's delusions. When Raj emerged from the bathroom, dressed in casual trousers and a button-down shirt, he looked different, younger, less severe. Good morning, he said awkwardly. I've ordered breakfast. Thank you. Priya gathered her things. I should freshen up. In the bathroom, Priya stared at her reflection. The woman who looked back was caught between worlds, still wearing her bridal makeup, but with uncertainty in her eyes. She washed her face vigorously, as if trying to find herself beneath the layers. When she returned, a lavish breakfast awaited them. They ate in uncomfortable silence, the easy conversation of last night seemingly forgotten. My parents expect us to make an appearance at lunch today, Raj finally said. A small family gathering. Priya nodded, pushing food around her plate. What happens after that? What do you mean? I mean, what happens to us? Do we live together immediately? Do I move into your home? Do I get any say in any of this? The questions she'd been holding back tumbled out. Raj set down his cup. I have a proposal. When Priya raised an eyebrow, he added hastily, a different kind of proposal. I own a penthouse downtown. It's spacious, with 2 master bedrooms on opposite sides. We could live there, maintain our privacy, but present a united front to our families. And my research? As I mentioned last night, Malhotra Industries is looking to invest in sustainable development. We're breaking ground on a new eco-friendly office complex next month. Your expertise would be valuable, if you're interested. Priya considered his words carefully. So I'd be your wife in name, your tenant in reality, and your employee on paper? Raj winced. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible. I'm trying to make the best of our situation, Priya. I know. She sighed. I'm sorry. This is just a lot to process. We have time, Raj said gently. We don't need to figure everything out today. The small family gathering turned out to be 50 close relatives crowded into the Malhotra mansion. Everyone wanted to congratulate the newlyweds, offer advice, and not so subtly inquire about future heirs to the Malhotra fortune. So when can we expect good news? Raj's aunt asked, patting Priya's stomach in a way that made her want to scream. We're focusing on getting to know each other first, Priya replied with a tight smile. The aunt looked scandalized. In my day, we didn't waste time. I gave birth to my first child 9 months after my wedding day. Raj, noticing Priya's distress, smoothly intervened. Aunt Leela, have you tried the new caterer's gulab jamun? It's exceptional. As the aunt moved away, Priya whispered, "Thank you." Raj squeezed her hand. "Stick close. I know all their tactics." They navigated the crowd together, fielding intrusive questions with practiced deflections. Priya observed how Raj handled his relatives, respectful but firm, never losing his composure. When his father called him over, Raj hesitated. "Would you come with me? He should meet you properly." Raj's father sat in a wheelchair by the window, a blanket across his legs despite the warm day. His body seemed frail, but his eyes were sharp as they assessed Priya. "So this is the bride," he said, his voice stronger than his appearance suggested. "Come closer, let me see you." Priya stepped forward, meeting his gaze without flinching. "They said you were educated. What do you know about business?" "Father," Raj began, but Priya touched his arm. "I know enough to understand that sustainable practices aren't just good for the environment but for long-term profitability," she answered. "Companies that adapt early to environmental regulations save millions later." The old man's eyes narrowed, then he unexpectedly smiled. "She has spine, this one. Not like those simpering socialites your mother usually finds." Raj looked stunned at this apparent approval. "Do you play chess?" Raj's father asked. "Yes, sir." "Good. Next time, we'll play. Now go, enjoy your party. And Raj, don't neglect the Singaporean investors. They're here as a courtesy." As they walked away, Raj shook his head in amazement. "He likes you. He never invites anyone to play chess. Is that a good thing? It's unprecedented." They spent the afternoon making rounds, Priya watching Raj transform into the charming business magnate when speaking with investors. He was good at it. Perhaps too good. His public persona was so different from the man who had fallen asleep on the couch talking about sustainable development. Which was the real Raj Malhotra? A week later, Priya stood in Raj's, their penthouse, surrounded by boxes. The space was impeccably designed, all glass and steel and minimalist furnishings. It felt cold, unlived in, like a magazine spread rather than a home. "Your room is this way," Raj said, leading her down a hallway. "I had the designer prepare it, but feel free to change anything." The bedroom was beautiful but generic, cream walls, tasteful artwork, king-sized bed with more pillows than any person could use. "It's lovely," Priya said politely. "But not you," Raj observed. Priya looked at him, surprised by his perception. "No, not really." "Then change it. Make it yours. This is your home now too." Priya spent the next few days settling in while Raj returned to work. She explored the penthouse, added personal touches to her room, and set up a small workspace for herself. They established a rhythm of sorts, sharing breakfast, then going their separate ways until dinner, which they sometimes ate together when Raj wasn't working late. 2 weeks after the wedding, Raj invited Priya to tour the construction site of the new eco-friendly office complex. "I thought you might want to see what we're planning before you decide if you want to be involved," he explained. The construction site was massive, covering several city blocks. As they walked through, wearing hard hats and safety vests, Raj explained the plans in detail. Priya was impressed despite herself. The design incorporated many of the principles she'd written about in her papers. "You've clearly done your research," she said. Raj looked almost shy. "I read your dissertation after our wedding night. Some of your recommendations seemed practical for this project." Priya stopped walking. "You read my entire dissertation?" "It was fascinating," Raj said earnestly. Your analysis of urban heat islands and how green spaces can mitigate them, we've incorporated those ideas into the rooftop design. Something shifted in Priya's chest. No one outside her academic circle had ever shown such interest in her work. The project lead is here today, Raj continued. Would you like to meet him? Give your input? The project lead turned out to be Vikram, a respected architect known for his environmental innovations. He welcomed Priya's expertise enthusiastically, showing her the detailed plans. Raj mentioned you might join the team as a consultant, Vikram said. We could certainly use your perspective. Priya glanced at Raj, who was keeping a respectful distance, allowing her the professional courtesy of a separate conversation with Vikram. I'm considering it, she replied carefully. After the tour, they stopped for lunch at a small cafe near the site, a far cry from the upscale restaurants Raj usually frequented, according to the tabloids. What did you think? Raj asked as they waited for their food. I'm impressed, Priya admitted. The project has real potential to set new standards for commercial construction. But? Priya hesitated. But I'm still concerned about my position. If I take this consulting role, will people take me seriously, or will they see me as the boss's wife playing at having a career? Raj considered her words. That's a fair concern. What if you came on as a third-party consultant through your university? Your contract would be with them, not directly with Malhotra Industries. You've thought about this. I've been trying to figure out how to make this work for both of us. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Priya studied Raj. In these casual moments, away from family and business associates, he seemed like a different person, more relaxed, more genuine. Tell me something true about you, Priya said suddenly. Something the newspapers don't know. Raj looked startled, then thoughtful. I wanted to be a pilot when I was young. I took flying lessons secretly because my father would never have approved. Can you still fly? A smile spread across his face. I have a pilot's license. I try to go up once a month at least. The perspective from above, it helps when things get overwhelming down here. I'd like to see that someday, Priya said without thinking. I could take you, Raj offered, equally impulsive. This weekend, if you're free. The spontaneous plan hung between them, not a business arrangement, not a family obligation, but a simple offer between two people getting to know each other. Yes, Priya said finally. I'd like that. As they walked back to the car, their hands brushed accidentally. Neither pulled away immediately. It was a small moment, insignificant perhaps, but it felt like a shift in their carefully constructed arrangement. That night, as they ate dinner on the balcony of their penthouse, the city lights twinkling below them, Priya realized she was no longer counting the days of her marriage like a prison sentence. She wasn't in love with Raj, the thought was still absurd, but she was beginning to see him as a person, not just the billionaire businessman who had disrupted her life. What are you thinking about? Raj asked, noticing her contemplative expression. That this isn't what I expected, she answered honestly. Is that good or bad? Priya looked at him, really looked at him, taking in the vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. I'm not sure yet, she said. But I'm willing to find out. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies, perfect flying weather. Priya dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, unsure what to expect from the day. She found Raj in the kitchen, making coffee. Ready for your first flight? He asked, sliding a mug toward her. Nervous, Priya admitted. I've only been on commercial planes. It's different in a small aircraft. More immediate. You feel everything, the wind, the turns. But I promise it's safe. His eyes held genuine excitement, like a child eager to share a favorite toy. They drove to a private airfield outside the city. Raj greeted the ground staff by name, asking about their families with sincere interest. This was yet another side of him Priya hadn't seen, the man who remembered the names of people's children and grandchildren. The small plane waited on the tarmac, gleaming white against the blue sky. "She's beautiful," Raj said, running his hand along the wing. Cessna 172 Skyhawk. Not the fanciest, but reliable. Perfect for short trips. Raj performed the pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency, explaining each step to Priya. His hands moved with confidence over the controls, his voice taking on a technical precision that showed his expertise. "You really love this," Priya observed. Raj looked up, surprised. "I do. It's the only thing I do purely for myself." Inside the cockpit, Raj helped Priya with her headset and explained the basic instruments before starting the engine. The plane vibrated beneath them as they taxied to the runway. "Ready?" Raj asked through the headset. Priya nodded, gripping her seat as the plane accelerated and then lifted into the air. Her stomach lurched, then settled as they climbed. The city fell away beneath them, transforming into a miniature model of itself. "Oh," Priya breathed, the view stealing her words. Raj glanced at her, smiling at her awestruck expression. "This is what I meant about perspective. Problems look different from up here. Smaller." They flew over the countryside, Raj pointing out landmarks. When they reached a beautiful lake surrounded by hills, he leveled the plane. "Want to try?" he asked unexpectedly. "What?" "No, I couldn't. Just hold the yoke. Feel how it responds. I'll be right here." Hesitantly, Priya placed her hands on the controls. The plane seemed to pulse beneath her fingertips, alive and responsive to the slightest movement. Gently, Raj guided, his hand briefly covering hers to demonstrate. "Like this." Priya made a small adjustment, feeling the plane respond. A laugh of delight escaped her. "I'm flying it." "You're a natural," Raj said, his voice warm with approval. For 20 minutes, she guided the plane through the sky under Raj's supervision. In those moments, their complicated relationship disappeared, they were simply two people sharing an experience, finding joy in the vast blue emptiness around them. When they landed, Priya's cheeks hurt from smiling. "That was incredible." "Thank you." Raj's answering smile was unguarded. "My pleasure. Literally, it's been a while since I enjoyed a flight that much." They stopped for lunch at a roadside dhaba Raj knew, sitting at a wooden table under a banyan tree. The food was simple but delicious, nothing like the gourmet meals served at the Malhotra mansion. "How did you find this place?" Priya asked, enjoying the spicy aloo paratha. "I discovered it during my rebellious phase in college. I'd drive for hours to escape my family's expectations." Raj looked around fondly. "The owner's son runs it now, but the recipes haven't changed." "You surprise me," Priya admitted. "The tabloids paint such a different picture. Of the cold, calculating businessmen?" Raj raised an eyebrow. "That person exists too. I've had to be that man to keep my father's company growing." "Which version is real?" Raj considered the question. "Both, I suppose. We all contain multitudes, don't we? The person I am in the boardroom, the person I am flying, the person I'm becoming as your." He hesitated, "Husband." "They're all me." The word husband hung between them, a reminder of their unusual circumstances. On the drive home, a comfortable silence settled between them. Priya watched the landscape pass, reflecting on the day. For the first time since the wedding, she felt something shift, not love, not yet, but possibility. "I've decided to take the consulting position," she said suddenly. "Through the university, as you suggested." Raj nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "I'm glad. The project will benefit from your expertise. Thank you for respecting my concerns about it. Most men in your position would have simply expected me to be grateful." I'm learning to see things from your perspective, Raj replied. It helps to fly above it all occasionally. When they arrived home, there was a moment of awkwardness in the elevator, the easy companionship of the day confronting the reality of their arranged marriage. I had a wonderful time today, Priya said as the elevator doors opened to their penthouse. So did I. Raj hesitated, then added, we could make it a regular thing. If you'd like. I would like that, Priya replied softly. As they parted to their separate rooms, Priya realized something had fundamentally changed. The man she'd married as a stranger was becoming someone she looked forward to knowing better. The walls they'd built between them were still standing, but perhaps, like the plane they'd flown today, they were beginning to see what lay beyond the clouds. Weeks passed, and a rhythm developed in Raj and Priya's unusual marriage. Mornings began with shared coffee before they went their separate ways, Raj to his corporate headquarters, Priya to the construction site where she had begun her consulting work. Evenings sometimes brought them together for dinner, other times kept them apart due to work commitments. Weekends occasionally included flights in Raj's small plane, weather permitting. It wasn't conventional, but it worked for them. Priya's work on the eco-friendly complex had given her renewed purpose. The project team valued her input, implementing many of her suggestions for sustainable water systems and energy-efficient designs. If anyone suspected favoritism due to her connection to Raj, her thorough research and practical solutions quickly dispelled such notions. One evening, Priya arrived home to find Raj pacing the living room, phone pressed to his ear, tension evident in every line of his body. I don't care what it costs, he was saying. Find the best specialists. Money is not an issue. He noticed Priya and nodded briefly in acknowledgement, continuing his conversation. I'm flying down tonight. Have the car ready at the airport. A pause. No, I'll come alone. Just handle the arrangements. Hanging up, he ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Priya had come to recognize as a sign of stress. What's happened? She asked. My father. He's had another stroke, worse than before. The doctors. His voice caught slightly, they're not optimistic. Without thinking, Priya stepped forward and placed her hand on his arm. I'm so sorry, Raj. He looked at her hand, then at her face, vulnerability replacing his usual composure. I need to go to him. Of course. Can I help with anything? Raj seemed about to refuse, then reconsidered. Would you come with me? He asked for you, actually. Wanted to finish that chess game. Priya was surprised. She'd visited her father-in-law several times since their first meeting, playing chess as promised. The old man was sharp and strategic, both on the board and in conversation. He'd taken an unexpected liking to her. I'll pack a bag, she said simply. 2 hours later, they were in Raj's private jet, flying south to his family's estate where his father had been moved from the hospital to spend what might be his final days in familiar surroundings. The cabin was quiet, the hum of engines the only sound. Raj stared out the window into the darkness, his profile sharp against the dim lighting. He was tough on me growing up, Raj said suddenly. Expected perfection in everything, academics, sports, business. Nothing was ever quite good enough. Priya remained silent, sensing he needed to talk. When I took over as CEO, he criticized every decision. Said I was too soft, too modern in my thinking. Raj's voice held no bitterness, only a son's complicated love. But he built something extraordinary from nothing. His father was a factory worker. Is that why you keep pushing to expand? Priya asked gently. To prove yourself to him? Raj looked at her, surprised by her perception. Maybe. I never thought of it that way. He paused. He likes you, you know. Says you remind him of my mother when she was young, before she became obsessed with society and appearances. I'm honored by the comparison, Priya said. Though I've only seen the formidable society matron version of your mother. A small smile touched Raj's lips. She wasn't always like that. There are old photos where she's laughing, hair wild, eyes bright with adventure. The smile faded. I sometimes wonder what changed her. Perhaps the weight of expectations, Priya suggested. It's not easy being a woman in powerful circles. Raj studied her. Is that how you feel? Weighed down by expectations? Sometimes, she admitted. But I'm fortunate. You've given me space to breathe, to work. It's more than many women get in arranged marriages. Something shifted in Raj's expression, surprise, then gratitude. Thank you for coming tonight. He hesitated. I didn't want to face this alone. The simple admission of vulnerability touched Priya deeply. This powerful man who commanded boardrooms and managed billion-dollar deals was, in this moment, just a son worried about his father. When they landed, a car was waiting as requested. The drive to the estate was silent, both lost in thought. As they approached the imposing gates, Raj reached across the seat and took Priya's hand. Whatever happens, he said quietly, I'm glad you're here. Priya squeezed his hand in response, the gesture saying what words couldn't. They were no longer just two strangers bound by arrangement. They had become something else, partners, perhaps. Friends, certainly. And possibly, something more. The Malhotra estate sprawled across acres of manicured gardens, the main house illuminated against the night sky. As they walked through the marble foyer, a doctor approached them. Mr. Malhotra, he greeted Raj. Your father is stable for now. The medication is helping with the pain, but his condition remains critical. Raj nodded, his face a careful mask. Can I see him? Yes, but briefly. He tires easily. Raj turned to Priya. Would you come with me? The question surprised her. This seemed like a private moment between father and son. Are you sure? He asked for both of us. They followed the doctor through the house to the master suite, transformed now into a makeshift hospital room. Machines beeped softly, monitoring vital signs. In the large bed, Raj's father looked diminished, his once commanding presence reduced by illness. Ah, the prodigal son returns, the old man said, his voice weaker but still carrying that familiar sharpness. And he brings his bride. Good. Raj moved to his father's bedside. How are you feeling? Like death, his father replied bluntly. Which is appropriate, considering. Father. No sentimentality, boy. I've no patience for it. His gaze shifted to Priya. Come closer, daughter-in-law. Let me look at you. Priya approached the bed, struck by the fierce intelligence still burning in the old man's eyes despite his failing body. You never finished our chess game, he said to her. I believe you had me in check, Priya replied. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Good memory. The board is set up by the window. We'll continue tomorrow, if I'm still here. Father, you should rest, Raj interjected. I'll rest soon enough, permanently. He coughed, wincing in pain. Leave us, Raj. I want to speak with your wife alone. Raj hesitated, looking between them with concern. It's fine, Priya assured him. I'll find you afterward. When Raj had left, the old man gestured to the chair beside his bed. Sit. I haven't much strength for formalities. Priya sat, waiting. Despite his frailty, Vikas Malhotra remained intimidating. My son has changed since marrying you, he said abruptly. We've only been married a short time, Priya responded carefully. Long enough. I know my son. He smiles now. Voluntarily. The old man's gaze was penetrating. What are your intentions toward him? The directness of the question startled her. we're still getting to know each other. You're an intelligent woman. Don't play coy. He adjusted himself against the pillows with a grimace. This marriage was arranged for business purposes. I understand that. But business and personal matters often intertwine, don't they? They can, Priya admitted. He respects you. That's rare. Raj doesn't respect many people. The old man's eyes narrowed. Do you respect him? Priya considered the question honestly. I do. He's not what I expected. None of us are, upon closer inspection. A fit of coughing seized him, and Priya quickly poured water from the bedside pitcher. After drinking, he continued, I married for love, you know. Scandalous in those days, to marry a woman from another community. This was unexpected. Raj had never mentioned this. Raj's mother was beautiful, brilliant, fierce, much like you seem to be. But the weight of being a Malhotra changed her. The social obligations, the constant scrutiny. She lost herself in trying to be what others expected. He reached out suddenly, his papery hand gripping Priya's with surprising strength. Don't make that mistake. And don't let Raj lose himself in being only my son, my heir. He's more than that. Why are you telling me this? Priya asked. Because I'm dying, he stated matter-of-factly. And because I see how he looks at you. Like he's found something he didn't know he was searching for. Before Priya could respond, the door opened as a nurse entered to check the monitors. Time for your medication, Mr. Malhotra. We'll finish our chess game tomorrow, Priya said, rising. The old man's eyes were already drooping from the medication. If not, consider our match a draw. That's high praise. I rarely offer draws. In the hallway, Priya found Raj speaking with his mother, their conversation tense. Unnecessary to bring her here, his mother was saying. Father asked for her, Raj replied firmly. At a time like this, family should, she stopped upon seeing Priya. Ah, here she is. I hope my husband didn't tire himself speaking with you. The coolness in her tone was unmistakable. This was the society matron Raj had mentioned, all polish and protocol. He's resting now, Priya said simply. That night, Raj and Priya were given adjacent rooms in the east wing. As Priya prepared for bed, a soft knock came at the connecting door. May I come in? Raj asked. He looked exhausted, the weight of the day evident in the slump of his shoulders. What did my father say to you? He asked, sitting heavily on the edge of her bed. Priya sat beside him. He told me about your mother, how they married for love, how different she was when they met. Raj looked surprised. He never speaks of those days. He seems worried that you're losing yourself in trying to be what he built. A bitter laugh escaped Raj. That's ironic, coming from him. He's the one who pushed me to be nothing but the Malhotra heir. Perhaps near the end, we see things differently. Priya hesitated, then added, he also said you've changed since our marriage. That you smile more. Raj turned to her, vulnerability clear in his eyes. Have I? Yes, she said softly. So have I. The air between them changed, charged with unspoken feelings. Raj's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, questioning. Priya leaned forward slightly, answering without words. Their first kiss was gentle, hesitant, a question rather than a declaration. When they pulled apart, surprise reflected in both their eyes, as if neither had expected this turn of events. I didn't plan that, Raj whispered, his hand still resting lightly on her cheek. Neither did I, Priya replied, her heart racing unexpectedly. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the arrangement that had brought them together suddenly feeling like something entirely different. Raj was the first to break the spell, dropping his hand and standing. It's been an emotional day. We should rest. Priya nodded, unsure whether to feel relieved or disappointed. "Good night, Raj." "Good night," he said, pausing at the connecting door. "Thank you for being here." After he left, Priya touched her fingers to her lips, trying to make sense of what had just happened. This wasn't part of their carefully negotiated arrangement. This was something unexpected, something real. Sleep came fitfully that night. Morning brought chaos. Priya woke to shouting in the hallway, followed by running footsteps. She threw on her robe and opened her door to find servants rushing past. "What's happening?" she asked one. "The master, Mr. Vikas Malhotra, he's taken a turn." Priya hurried toward the master suite, finding Raj outside the door, his face ashen as doctors moved frantically around his father's bed. "Raj," she said softly, approaching him. He turned to her, eyes haunted. "The doctor says it won't be long now." Without hesitation, Priya took his hand. He gripped it like a lifeline. Time seemed suspended as they waited, joined shortly by Raj's mother and various relatives who had been called to the estate. The family dynamics were obvious, everyone deferring to Raj's mother, who maintained perfect composure despite the circumstances. "You should be in there," she said to Raj. "Not standing out here with." Her eyes flicked dismissively over Priya. "We're both staying," Raj replied firmly, his grip on Priya's hand tightening. His mother's lips thinned with disapproval, but she said nothing more. An hour later, the doctor emerged, his expression confirming what they already knew. "I'm sorry." He passed peacefully. Raj's face remained stoic, but Priya felt the slight tremor in his hand. His mother let out a small, controlled sob before straightening her shoulders. "I'll notify the extended family," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "Raj, you'll need to contact the board members." Raj nodded mechanically. "I'll make the calls from father's study." "I'll come with you," Priya offered. His mother interjected, "That's not necessary. This is a family matter." Something hardened in Raj's expression. "Priya is family, mother. My wife." The emphasis on the word wife was unmistakable. For perhaps the first time, Raj was acknowledging their marriage as something more than an arrangement. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral preparations, ritual ceremonies, and business contingencies. Through it all, Raj remained outwardly composed, the perfect heir accepting condolences from business associates and family friends. Only Priya saw the moments of grief when they were alone, the silent tears as he sorted through his father's personal items, the way his hands shook slightly before important meetings. On the night before the funeral, Priya found Raj in his father's study, staring at the chessboard still set up from the unfinished game. "He never got to finish," Raj said without looking up. "He was 3 moves from checkmate, you know." Priya sat across from him. "He told me to consider it a draw." A ghost of a smile touched Raj's lips. "High praise indeed." "He was proud of you," Priya said softly. "He may not have shown it the way you needed, but he was." "How can you know that?" "The way he spoke about you. The fact that his last request was to see you. Some fathers never even give their children that much." Raj looked at her curiously. "You don't speak much about your parents." "There's not much to say. They did what they thought was right, arranging this marriage to save the family business." Priya traced the edge of the chessboard. "I resented them for it. Still do, sometimes. And yet, here you are. Supporting me through this." "I'm not supporting the arrangement anymore," Priya said quietly. "I'm supporting you." The distinction hung between them, significant and undeniable. Raj reached across the table, taking her hand. "When we go back to the city, after all this is done, I'd like us to try something different." "Different how?" "No more separate lives under one roof. A real marriage. If," his voice faltered slightly, "if that's something you might want too." The question was vulnerable, honest in a way Raj rarely allowed himself to be. The powerful businessman, the dutiful son, the perfect heir, all these personas had been stripped away, leaving just the man. Priya looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. The answer came more easily than she would have expected months ago. Yes, she said simply. I'd like to try. The grief in Raj's eyes mingled with something new, hope, perhaps. In the midst of endings, they were finding a beginning. 3 months after Vikas Malhotra's funeral, life had settled into a new rhythm. Raj had assumed full leadership of Malhotra Industries, introducing changes his father might have considered too progressive. The company's focus on sustainable development had expanded, with the eco-friendly office complex now serving as their flagship project. For Priya and Raj, personal changes had been equally significant. True to his word, Raj had suggested they start fresh upon returning to the city. Their penthouse had been redecorated together, blending both their tastes. The connecting door between their bedrooms now remained open. Small, everyday rituals had developed, coffee shared on the balcony each morning, dinner together most nights regardless of how late work kept them, weekend flights when weather permitted. They were building something neither had expected from their arranged beginning, a partnership based on mutual respect and growing affection. On the anniversary of their wedding, Raj surprised Priya by coming home early, the penthouse filled with fresh flowers. "What's all this?" she asked, setting down her research papers. "I thought we should acknowledge the day," Raj said, looking almost shy. "1 year ago, we were strangers being forced together. I wanted to mark how far we've come." A small velvet box sat on the dining table. Priya raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Open it," Raj encouraged. Inside was a delicate pendant, a chess piece, the queen, crafted in platinum with a small green emerald set in the crown. "It's beautiful," Priya whispered. "It reminded me of you," Raj said, taking the necklace and moving behind her to fasten it around her neck. "Strong, strategic, protecting what matters." His fingers lingered at her nape, the touch sending a familiar warmth through her. Their physical relationship had developed gradually over the past months, each step feeling natural rather than forced. "I have something for you too," Priya said, though it's nowhere near as elegant. She retrieved a wrapped package from her study and handed it to him. Inside was a leather-bound book. "Open it," she mimicked his words. The pages contained photographs and notes, moments from their year together. The first flight in his small plane, the opening ceremony of the eco-friendly complex, quiet evenings on their balcony, the chess set from his father now displayed in their living room. "You documented us," Raj said, his voice thick with emotion. "I wanted to show you something," Priya explained. "Look at your face in the early photos, then the later ones." Raj flipped through the pages, seeing what she meant. The stiff, formal expressions of their early days had given way to genuine smiles, relaxed postures, eyes that held warmth when looking at each other. "This is the story of two strangers becoming." Priya paused, searching for the right word. "Partners," Raj supplied. "Friends." He looked up from the book. "Lovers." "Yes," she agreed softly. "All of those things." They moved to the balcony with glasses of wine, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. "I was so angry when this marriage was arranged," Priya admitted. "I felt like my life was being hijacked, my independence stolen." "And now?" Raj asked. "Now I understand that independence doesn't mean isolation. We've built something I never expected, a partnership where we're both free to be ourselves, but stronger together." Raj took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I have a confession. That night at the hotel, our wedding night, I'd researched you thoroughly. Read all your papers, studied your work. I was intrigued before I even met you." Priya laughed. "And I'd convinced myself you were just another entitled playboy. What changed your mind?" Actions speak louder than reputations, Priya said simply. You showed me who you really were, day by day. As twilight deepened around them, Raj turned to face her fully. I have a proposition. Another one? Priya teased, remembering their initial arrangement. A renewal, he clarified. Not of vows, we never really made any that were truly ours. But a promise, between us, no families involved this time. What kind of promise? That we choose each other, freely. That what began as an arrangement continues as a choice. Priya considered his words. Are you asking me to marry you when we're already married? I'm asking if you would have married me if it had been your choice from the beginning. The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Priya thought of the journey they'd traveled, from reluctant strangers to trusted partners. No, she said honestly, watching his face fall momentarily before she continued. I wouldn't have married you then, because I didn't know you. But knowing you now. She squeezed his hand, I would choose you today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. Relief and joy transformed Raja's expression. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. That's all I needed to hear. Their kiss was nothing like their first tentative one. This was certain, deep, a promise sealed between equals who had found their way to love through the most unlikely beginning. Later that night, lying in each other's arms, Priya traced patterns on Raja's chest. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? If our families hadn't arranged our marriage? If we'd fought harder against it, or if we'd just maintained our original arrangement, separate lives under one roof? Raj considered the question. I think some people are meant to find each other, one way or another. Perhaps this was simply our path. A billionaire and an environmental scientist, Priya mused. Not the most likely match. The best partnerships often aren't, Raj replied, pulling her closer. They challenge each other, balance each other. Like a good game of chess, different pieces with different strengths, working together. As they drifted toward sleep, Priya reflected on their journey. What had begun as an unwanted arrangement, a wedding night she had dreaded, had transformed into something precious. Their story wasn't a fairy tale, it was something better. Something real.